All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We're pretty excited here this afternoon. This has been a big week for the department and big week for myself in particular, with a couple of big files finally getting moving. Today is our net zero announcement. So this is an announcement about our clean future as a province, and this is about planning for future generations. We've been talking about net zero and our ambitious climate targets for some time now. We've received quite a bit of attention nationally, internationally, from people reaching out, talking about what we were doing with much excitement. So we're excited to unveil the plan today, to fully talk about it, and continue the work we've been doing on it. These targets are important because much of what we do, driving, heating our homes, manufacturing, results in greenhouse gas emissions or combustion of gasoline, diesel, and home heating oil. This is having an effect on our climate in the form of increased temperatures, an increase in extreme weather events that have impacts all over the world. As an island, we are disproportionately affected by these impacts, and as a province, we've already built climate change adaptation into much of our decision-making process. We have made significant progress on renewable energy generation, energy efficiency, and conservation programs. So it's time to scale up our efforts and get on our path to net zero fully. So today I'm happy to release the net zero framework, and this plan will outline 5-year increments towards our net zero goals. This plan will show islanders how to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, increase investments in clean technology and innovation across sectors, how to shift the way we do business, and so much more. So I'm joined today by Derek Ellis, who is our Director of Sustainability, and Angela Banks, who's our Net Zero Coordinator in the department. They're going to elaborate on this framework and talk about our plans moving ahead. The presentation that they're going to do is about 20 minutes long, and it's good detail, so I'm looking forward to hearing back from people. But our path forward towards net zero requires all islanders, and that's why it's important. And we're going to be there to make investments, just like we have all along. So while this plan has been developed, we knew what some of our big impacts were as far as carbon emissions, and we already have things in place working towards our goals, such as our active transportation fund, our island-wide transportation that's now a toonie, which we're really excited about, and we'll see future expansion into other areas. Our heat pump program that's been very successful, and our free heat pump program that we talked about last fall that's been highly subscribed to. Electric buses, that we have numerous electric buses on the road in our education system, and we'll continue to grow that fleet. Our EV rebate program, which is the most aggressive EV rebate program in all of Canada, and it applies to both new and used vehicles. Our solar rebate program, which is the most aggressive solar rebate program in all of Canada that's been highly subscribed to. We've completed a climate risk assessment that was tabled in the legislature last fall. And as we talked about earlier this week when we made the announcement in Georgetown, we're investing into clean tech, which we think is going to be very important. So we know we have lots more to do, and we are prepared to do it. So I'm going to turn it over to Derek and Angela to take it from here.
Great.
Thank you, Minister. Maybe I'll go, Angela, and I'll just do an introduction to the slides. So we want to get the slide deck up. I'll start with a little introduction, but if some of you may recall, back in October of 2020, we announced these 2030 and 2040 GHG targets. Since then, we've been working really hard behind the scenes to put together a plan that'll give us direction over the next 2 decades to meet those targets. We're really excited to share that with you folks here today, and just wanted to highlight some of the hard work from our own department that went into this plan, as well as other departments in our government here on PEI, and all the individuals that gave us feedback since we announced the targets, as well as the stakeholder groups that we engaged with along the way. So again, really excited to show you guys what we have planned and to articulate what it will take to meet those targets. So we want to head to the next slide. I think it's important before we start just to talk about our vision here, and the vision is to become Canada's first net zero province, and that'll be a model for us to be proud of and for other jurisdictions to follow. In order to meet net zero GHG emissions by 2040, what we need to do here is to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases we're releasing into the atmosphere, and then offset the remaining greenhouse gas emissions through carbon sequestration. Absorbing carbon in landscapes like our forests. So this is just a graph here to show that our current policies will see GHG reductions that are not insignificant, but there is quite a gap between that green line and the brown line that shows the pathway that we will need to follow to actually reach our 2040 target. There is a lot of work to do, and this plan is organized to get into some detail on what we need to do sector by sector. So our vision here, we've got some good momentum. We made some good progress to date in renewable energy development, generation. We've got a commitment and a really mature suite of efficiency and conservation programs that is administered by the province. What we'd like to do is further reduce our greenhouse gas emissions that come from energy use and meet our 2030 interim net zero energy target. And then finally, to get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040, well ahead of the federal 2050 target. Where we are today, where this on our left, this graph is showing where the bulk of our emissions are coming from. 44% from transportation, 25% from agriculture, followed by buildings at 18% and industry and waste at 12%. What's interesting is that the graph on the right shows that we do have the highest household greenhouse gas emissions of any province, and the household GHG emissions being defined by those that come from heating our homes and getting us from place to place. So our transportation or home heating emissions are the highest in the country. That is due to the fact that we're heavily reliant on home heating oil to heat our buildings, and passenger vehicles, of course, to get us to and from work and where we need to go. The framework that we'll be showing you folks today lays out our high-level vision out to 2040. We'll be supporting this framework by a series of 5-year action plans that will be much more specific. We'll be setting interim emission reduction targets as well, and then reporting annually on our progress to date. And really want to outline that this is a shared commitment. It's not on government alone or any one industry group or individual to do this. We will be requiring buy-in from everyone on this one. So really, realistically, all stakeholders have a critical role here in creating a better future, more sustainable economy for all islanders to benefit from. On the next slide here, I'll turn it over to Angela. This is how we've structured each chapter in the framework. There are 6 chapters, and I'll turn it over to Angela to guide you folks through our transportation pillar.
Thanks, Derek. Pillar 1 is all about transforming the way people and goods move on PEI. We have a 2030 target of 25 to 30% reduction in emissions from transportation, and that increases to 55 to 65% by 2040. We have 3 goals: to reduce our reliance on passenger vehicles, to transition to zero-emission vehicles and non-emitting fuel sources, and to invest in clean fuels and new technologies. Some of the measures of success involve the level of investment in active transportation routes and an increase in availability and use of public transit in urban and rural PEI. Our second pillar is transition to efficient and cleaner buildings. We have a 65 to 70% reduction in emissions from buildings target by 2030, and that is increased to 85 to 95% by 2040. We have 3 goals to get us there: make existing homes and buildings more energy efficient, construct more efficient homes and buildings, and pilot and scale up cost-effective solutions. Some of the measures of success involve 100% use of non-fossil fuel sources in primary heating systems in new government-owned buildings and all government-owned building retrofits going forward, and 100% use of non-fossil fuel sources in primary heating systems in new construction for residential homes by 2025 and commercial buildings by 2030. Our third pillar is shape agriculture for PEI's transition to net zero. Our 2030 target is a 10 to 15% reduction in agriculture-related emissions, and that increases to 35 to 40% by 2040. It's worthwhile to note here that the baseline is 2015. Our three goals are to reduce emissions from crops and livestock, to improve soil health and the ability of soils to absorb carbon, and to accelerate the use of advanced agricultural clean technologies. Some of our measures of success include having 90% of agriculture acres use industry-related leading best nutrient management practices by 2040, investment in research and development, technology, and equipment, and having 90% of livestock farms use industry-leading best practices for manure management by 2040. Pillar 4 is related to removing carbon through forestry technologies and emerging opportunities. Our 2030 target is a 10 to 15% increase in carbon sequestration, and that increases to 25 to 30% by 2040. Our three goals involve maintaining what we have, growing what we need, and investing in early-stage technologies. Some of our measures of success include an upward trend in protected land as a percentage of total acres, a provincial land use planning framework and supporting policies to ensure successful implementation, and 100% of targeted acres of forested land have adopted sustainable forestry management practices going forward. Pillar 5, create a clean industry and waste advantage. Our 2030 target is a 65 to 70% reduction in emissions related to industry and waste, and that increases to 85 to 95% by 2040. Our three goals are to enable cleaner PEI industries and businesses, to explore waste to energy opportunities, and to invest in next generation technologies. Some measures of success include attraction, growth, and diversity of clean tech and related businesses in PEI, the number of tons of organic waste diverted to energy systems, and the number of homes and vehicles powered with biogas on Prince Edward Island. Pillar 6 is all about inspiring transformational change through leadership and engagement. As we know, our 2030 target is net zero energy, and our 2040 target is net zero greenhouse gas emissions. We get there by creating the right environment to drive change, by empowering islanders to partner in the path ahead, and by leading through expertise and collaboration. Some of the measures of success overall will be a reduction in the consumption of fossil fuels related to program outcomes and evaluation. We'll also look at the annual amount of carbon pricing proceeds invested in programs and benefits to islanders and businesses. And we're also really interested in the growing number of local, national, and international clean tech companies on PEI. We expect 2,000 new jobs in the clean tech sector alone in PEI by 2030. I'll now pass it over to Derek to wrap up the presentation.
Thank you, Angela. So you may have noticed the third goal in each of these chapters has something to do with early stage technologies, piloting and scaling up solutions on that front. We really think that is important to have sort of a portfolio approach of investments in promising technologies that may be able to help us both reduce our emissions and increase carbon sequestration here on PEI. That very much relates to the announcement that was made earlier this week on government investment in a clean tech park in Georgetown, as well as a joint campus located on site. We think that there's a lot we can do to reduce our emissions here on island in the near term. But we will need some help from technological solutions here over the next 2 decades, and it's important that we do make those sorts of investments as well. Just want to talk a little bit about accountability here and the Net Zero Carbon Act. So this framework, while it's high level and it is a long-term framework, will again be supported by consecutive 5-year action plans that will be much more specific. We've also been working hard over the last year to create a structure to support this. We've got our Office of Net Zero that we've created here over the past year that is in the Department of Environment, Energy, and Climate Action. We'll be quarterbacking this effort and acting as a catalyst for government to spark action on this front. Again, this is a shared responsibility, not just across government, but across PEI, and we're looking to create as much buy-in here as possible. There is quite a good amount of transparency and accountability built into this process as part of the Net Zero Carbon Act that was passed last year. There is a requirement to report annually on our progress made to date. We'll be doing that this year before the end of the first sitting of the legislature. We'll also be creating a net zero advisory committee that consists of folks from industry, NGOs, academia, you name it. So that will be included, their recommendations rather will be included in that annual report as well. So we do think there's accountability, transparency built into this process, which is good for everyone involved. We've done some extensive stakeholder consultation recently and wanted to just point out some of that support that we've received to date. This won't be the end or the last opportunity to have input from stakeholder groups. So by all means, please reach out if you have project ideas or ideas for policies that may help us reach these targets. We're all ears. We want to make sure that the stakeholders here on PEI have every opportunity to have their voices heard and to partner in the path ahead. So with that, I will just end the presentation, open the floor for questions, and thanks everyone for listening.
Stu Neepy, The Guardian.
Hi, afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. I guess first question for Minister Myers. So I understand the Net Zero Carbon Act, it requires the tabling of a report on greenhouse gas emissions for the 2021 year. When will that report be tabled, and is it complete now?
I'll have to get back to you on that. That's not what today's presentation is about.
Okay. So can you tell me if the Net Zero Carbon Act has actually been proclaimed as it was required under legislation?
I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Well, that's not a yes. Okay.
Well, that's not what today's presentation is about. This is our pathway to a net zero. Like the act was passed by the legislature. All the pieces will be put in place and announced in due time.
Okay. Next question for, I suppose, Derek and Angela. So I note that 2015 is the sort of baseline year for the individual pillars of the plan. Why is that the year as opposed to 2005, which I think the federal government tends to use for its baseline year?
Maybe I can take that one. We think that having a more recent baseline is a more meaningful baseline for our emissions reduction targets. So, you know, if we go back and use a baseline where we've got higher emissions, you know, the targets are therefore more achievable. So, you know, we've got good data available for 2015. We've been benefiting from emissions reductions, you know, across the board, and we want to make this plan as ambitious as possible and pick that year.
Okay. I suppose my next question would be for Angela, as it's about the transportation section. So there's the ZEV mandate target for 2035, and it says that there's going to be sort of interim targets, but it's not really set out what the interim targets are for, say, 2025 or 2030. Now, BC and Quebec's plans, I believe they do set out interim targets. So why not PEI, I guess, for the interim targets?
We haven't set them out yet, but I mean, that comes back to our 5-year plans and our 5-year updates, and they'll be included in those. We have to look at things like budget, obviously, and feasibility, and we have to talk to different stakeholders, like the transportation sector, our Automobile Dealerships Association, and the like. So we feel like, you know, not having things written in stone is maybe a good thing for Prince Edward Island at this time.
Okay, so Quebec seems to be using a credit system for ZEV mandates. I mean, would PEI basically be employing a similar sort of credit system for the reductions in fossil fuel vehicles?
We'll look at that. There's several different options that we have to look at right now in terms of how we're going to measure reductions related to things like ZEV mandates. So it's something that's going to happen down the road, but probably not something that we'd want to speak to right now.
Okay. So looking at the transit section, I mean, there's a goal of increasing the overall ridership of transit, but there's no specific numbers attached to that. I mean, this may well make the difference, you know, in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, you know, less cars on the road.
Yep.
So, I mean, given that this plan has sort of been in the works for, over a year, about 16 months, why are there no hard targets for increasing transit usage?
Well, there are targets. They're not necessarily hard targets, but we are already investing in rural transit. I do have some numbers. I believe there was 4,711 transit trips outside the capital area, and that's just from October 12th to December 3rd. So we already are making those investments, and we are working with T3, and that's to both increase ridership and also increase the number of rides available for Islanders on PEI. So we are working actively to increase transit on Prince Edward Island.
Is there a goal, or will there be a goal by, say, 2025 or 2030 for how many, what the ridership is per year?
There likely will be a goal come 2025 for the increase in ridership. We are just kind of vamping up different areas, especially rural transit. So certainly, we look forward to having specific goals in mind, but I think we have to look at various options and what they're going to cost.
Okay, so the rural transit is it's interesting and very useful and very inexpensive, but one would assume that probably most people who would be using transit would be in sort of urban areas. I mean, will there be, will there be sort of a focus on sort of scaling up transit ridership specifically in sort of like the capital region or Summerside?
100%, and that's the conversation we've been having with T3 is to increase the number of rides. So folks should be able to go to a bus stop and just know that every 15 minutes the bus is going to go there. They don't have to think about it. They don't need to use an app. You don't need to track the bus. So that's ideally what we'd like to see in the future on PEI.
Okay, last thing for me. So there is I guess a bit of a mention of carbon capture and storage. Investing in this technology. There's a fair bit of debate about this technology, about, how unproven or proven the technology is. So how much do you intend to invest in, research or development of this unproven technology, say, within the next fiscal year?
I'd say within the next fiscal, probably not a huge amount, but certainly it's something that we need to be aware of and be able to, have the ability to pivot and invest when needed, when these new technologies become available that can assist us in reaching our net zero goal.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Nicola McLeod, CBC.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, good afternoon. We started off with that 2017 data that shows that per capita Islanders have higher emissions per capita than other provinces. When you're looking at the strategy and the philosophy going into it, how significantly are individual emissions of individual Islanders stressed versus that of industry and like the large corporate players within them? Like, who are we really hoping to hold accountable here in this reduction targets?
Angela, maybe I'll take that one. Because we don't have such heavy industry and manufacturing as some of the other jurisdictions in Canada, the majority of our emissions are coming, or a significant amount of emissions are coming at that household level. You'll see when we look at the targets that we've set in the transportation sector and the building sector, those are aggressive targets. So we're recognizing that our household emissions being high need to be addressed, and realistically, that's some of the low-hanging fruit that we'll be tackling here in the near term. I don't think it's really about pointing a finger or saying who's at fault here. It's more about saying where are our sources of emissions and where can we make headway here as quickly as possible. So we see those two areas as real areas of opportunity.
Right. So when we're looking at the transportation sector, like you mentioned, it's really based on individual emissions, not necessarily the shipping sector being a huge contributor.
I believe the numbers I've seen recently are roughly 2/3 are coming from passenger vehicles, 2/3 of our transportation emissions. So that would differ from other jurisdictions across the country as a higher percentage coming from our passenger vehicle trips.
I know the minister has spoken to this before, but especially around the topic of electric vehicles, trying to make it more affordable and more equitable. for Islanders to get into electric vehicles, to be taking transportation, to be doing all these things. But, we can't deny at this point that it still is true that many of these things, heat pumps, electric vehicles, they can be cost prohibitive for a province like PEI that does have a lot of low-income individuals. So is there actually going to be a plan laid out at some point for how we are going to assist people who are in a low-income situation with actually reducing their personal emissions when so much of it is tied to the ability to make these investments in their own homes or in their vehicles?
I'll try that one, Derek.
Sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You couldn't actually be more right. We really have to be concerned not only with this, but when carbon tax gets introduced here later this winter, we have to be concerned about our low-income islanders and how we bring everybody along together. So we've been having discussions on how we can make the entry into electric vehicles more accessible. Had a meeting in my office earlier today about the very topic and some of the things we can do. So we're looking at what our options are, and I do think it's very important. Our heat pump program, we do have a free heat pump program for the lowest quintile now. We are having internal discussions about laddering that up or changing the number, because as we get through the list of people we currently have, we want to continue to use our funds to do that. So we're acutely aware that some of these changes are going to impact low-income islanders more unless government is there to help them. So our plan is to be there to help them.
And so there was also, back to kind of the topic of accountability, there was a lot of targets laid out today and kind of that talk of accountability. But when we're looking at the sectors that are involved, agriculture, transportation, are the sectors going to be responsible for coming up with that pathway for how they're going to meet these targets, or will the government be laying out that plan for industries to follow?
You want to try that, Angela?
Yeah, sure. It'll be a cooperative effort. Certainly, we're working with folks in the Department of Agriculture, if we want to talk about agriculture specifically, as well as various industry groups. So, as we said, all islanders have a role to play, and we'll be making sure that everyone has a voice in the path ahead.
And this will be the last one for me, for Minister Myers, actually. But, the topic of reforesting PEI had come up in the last sitting of the legislature. We had seen numbers to suggest that PEI had really critical loss of forestry and forest cover on the island in the past few decades. Is there a concrete plan in place yet to see that reforestation effort? And, because that is a big part of carbon sequestration, as you've laid out today.
Yeah, well, we planted 2 million trees last year. We know that's not enough because we know the time for maturity of a tree is too long to impact in our short-term goals. So we have to look at forestry as a sector and how we build a more sustainable model. So yeah, we've done quite a bit of work on that. How do we get back what we lost? That's going to take a lot longer. We can't replace some of that forest cover overnight, but we're committed to continue to plant trees, which helps in the long term. But we're looking at clearly looking at other structures that are much more sustainable for island forests, because it is important.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I guess that's it. I thank everyone for tuning in, and thank Angela and Derek for doing this presentation. And we're excited to see what the feedback is like in the public. I think this is a good plan. Thank you.